This
Uh,
conference will now be recorded.
there is a
Sorry, Mike.
meeting coming up 45 minutes after the hour, 2:45 my time, that I'm going
I
to
understand.
plan to get on, or 1:45
Okay.
rather, sorry.
Okay. Well,
So,
welcome everybody. So this is one of the meetings that I set up for this week. Three of them had the same agenda, and the purpose was to walk through this 24-page document about the year two project plan and statement of work, describe what's there, ask questions, collect comments, so that we can have a scope that everybody agrees on. Part of the reason for setting up these meetings is to save people time. I noticed that it's a bit of a struggle to start reading a 24-page document, and I wanted to condense this into maybe 30, 40 minutes or an hour of discussion, and also get your feedback as effectively as possible. So what you see on your screen is the document, the front page of the project plan. And I will go through it and just briefly explain the main points, and I will stop every few minutes so that I can answer your questions. The document starts with an overview of things that are included in the document, and the figure 1 shows the basic approach that we're going to take. We have essentially 4 things going on. We have first research on 3 topics that have been selected: the organizational culture, managing change, and workforce. It says people, but really this is about workforce. And these are fairly broad and basically huge topics, but our goal was that they would support the case studies. And the case study are basically improvement initiatives. Case study would document an improvement initiatives that utility would undergo. So the most of the case studies, it seems, are going to be focusing on year 1 topics that were examined in track 2, which is, I know this is really kind of unnerving. I have to scroll down to show you something, so just bear with me a little bit. Oops. Yeah, so these are the case studies that are results of the survey where, and they're not complete. Some additional utilities will do improvement initiatives in these track 2 areas, the 4 track 2 areas that we were working on in year 1. And this means that there will be a effort going on within the same same sort of topic by different utilities. So that is part of it. In addition to this, there will be improvement initiatives targeted for topics that are not on this list. For example, Kansas City is in that category, and some others. So they may look at things outside of this, and they would select an area or a topic of priority for their organization. And I will go into the detail of what these improvement initiatives are about. So before I go there, I want to say that we will follow the same methodology that we have done in the past, which is, basically what UAIM is about: to document the current condition, identify things we want to improve and analyze, design what we would like to have, and then prepare a plan and implement a plan. So this is how it's, this is a proposed schedule. This is a template that will be adjusted based on what utilities are able to, how they can sort of organize their resources and how big the topic is. But this is a basic template for how the work activities are going to be laid out. So I will explain what this is, and then I'll stop for questions. At the top, this kind of yellow, whatever, beige area is a typical improvement initiative. And there will be, as I said, a number of them with different scope, but the general outline for the schedule is, you'll notice that the first month is on the schedule is May. So that is sort of a planning period. We're going to start the work in June. All these activities in May are basically, as you can see on this one, is define improvement initiatives, and down on the other three topics is define the themes. So it's just really preparation work during May so that we can be ready to go in June, when hopefully this crisis gets a little bit more calmed down and people can devote more time to UAIM. So you will recognize the structure of this because we have gone through these things collaboratively in year one, which is to organize, and which means identify the stakeholders and organize, implement initiatives and start them. And then we would go to develop as is detailed business process models, analyze them, prepare implementation, the design a 2B, prepare implementation plan, execute, and prepare a case study report. So that's, and I will provide a lot more detail of what can be entailed in the document. The other three blocks in the middle, workforce, organizational culture, and change management, the goal is to have an intense period of several months in the beginning, going into October. This is this line here is WEFTEC. So between now and WEFTEC, we would look at identifying research that would inform these improvement initiatives in terms of methodologies, tools, and approaches to address these issues of workforce, organization, culture, and change management as they move towards the implementation of their improvement initiatives in this area right here. And finally, the bottom is that where these three initiatives continue to go to prepare and document an integrated change management resource or manual or guidelines that could be developed and then posted to the knowledge base. So before I get into more detail, let me just stop now and ask if there are any questions. I'm going to have to call out Mike Sweeney to get at least one question. Mike? Let me see. Mike, we're not hearing you. You're muted.
Sorry about that. You overlaid the Gantt chart. Can you pull the Gantt chart up real quick? I don't have a question. I'm just real curious how the movie unfolds here between the three main areas. I'm still looking for how they're different from one another. But keep going, Cello. I don't want to tie it up.
Okay. I will answer that question, how these things are different from each other, when I start discussing these individual things, and I'll show where the information is in the OneDrive that illustrates what I'm talking about. So,
okay.
So let me start by talking about these improvement initiatives, which the goal for these initiatives is to identify something in a utility where we can get tangible benefits for that specific utility. Now, in year, sorry for the strolling. I know it's annoying when you're not the one doing the strolling, but okay. In year one, we have developed fairly extensive models on a high level for things such as CIP delivery. We identify a number of stages, business case evaluation, developing asset management plans, and so forth. So based on the utility's priorities, resources, and interests, they can approach these improvement initiatives in different ways. In principle, they could attack the whole thing. They could say, okay, this is the 2B model that was developed that's generic for, let's say, CIP delivery. We're going to develop the same model that's specific to our utility, that includes our conditions, that includes our artifacts and stuff like that. That is not a small amount of work. So another possibility is for utility to scope, to select a more limited scope. So to illustrate what that means is I'm showing just a snippet from one of the higher level business process diagrams that were developed in year one. And if we look here, there are several activities right now. Let's say on the left, we have trained staff on CIP development update process. So utility could say, we can't attack all of this stuff, but we want to see, we want to look at this one and specifically. So they would take this activity and they would break it down, collapse it down into more detail, and develop a business process model. How they do it now. If they don't do it now, they can start with a 2B and say, this is how we feel we can effectively train our staff on this update process, and include artifacts and completely focus just on this piece. Or they could maybe select this box right here that says evaluate asset management plan, or for example, rank asset risks and construct an asset risk model. So they could focus only on a piece. And this is just one snippet from the 4 models that were developed. So they could say, well, we want to look at how we rank the asset risks. How do we identify the parameters? What is our model for assessing risk? And then just essentially break down this activity further and provide a lot of detail. They could include what systems they may be using, what data they would be required, and identify improvements and actually improve that specific aspect of their work. So we're trying to strike a balance where not everybody's trying to boil the ocean, and people can attack this in sort of smaller bite-sized chunks, identify things that are a priority for them. So these are 2 ways to scope the improvement initiatives. But at the end of the day, we are expecting that we would have productive efforts that would result in improvement. And the type of improvements, I sort of listed 3 examples here, might be to adjust the workflow, the sequence and paths of activities. For example, changing activities from being done in series to some of them being done at the same time in parallel, applying new technologies to maybe automate certain activities or interactions, or modifying or integrating existing technologies, such as, for example, integrating existing computer systems like maintenance management, SCADA, maybe GIS or modeling, vibration monitoring, whatever, to aid in a specific activity, such as, for example, making decisions when to rehabilitate or replace equipment. So the answer for what type of improvement to make will really depend on the specific process, specific utility, but that is sort of what these improvement initiatives, just want to warn you, I'm going to be scrolling all the way down, would look like. So what I've done in the back of the document is provided an overview or summary of an improvement initiatives, what kind of things to look at, how to go about it. And as far as resources, I also developed a statement of work for an improvement initiative that defines the deliverables, and also put it in a format such like a detailed scope that if a utility said, you know what, we need help from the outside or just to help or internal resources, so that they can have a list of things that would be done under each one of these things. You know, how would they document the as is or analyze, and what would be the outcomes for every activity? So all that is included. Some notes on recommended practices for each one of these items. And I'm sorry for scrolling down. I'm looking for something that can, okay. So, and what I also included is a table of where I mapped the types of skills and resources that one might need on these different activities and sub-activities. And so identified 6 roles or 6 areas of skill. One is project manager. The other one is subject matter expert, somebody who understands the best practices in the targeted business area. Somebody who will actually develop BPMN models. Somebody who will facilitate the sessions and get people engaged, and then utility staff that understand the details of how they currently do things and who's involved and what systems they use, so forth. And utility management to provide the strategic business goals and strategies. So this does not necessarily mean 6 people. It just means it could easily be that the project manager is also the business process modeler and the facilitator, and maybe the subject matter experts. But these are the types of knowledge that have to be engaged or included in each one of these tasks. So that I've included a RACI matrix for the description and define the outcomes for each one of these activities. So this is just a brief summary of what's in the document regarding improvement initiatives. And then I'll talk about the three people-related things, but I'll first take a break to see if there are any questions so far. Okay, I'm not hearing any questions, but folks who have been with the project for a while, they're familiar with all these activities. We've gone through them in phase 1 and phase 2. Even in phase 3, we've done it, but on a more high-level generic. So that is the documentation that's provided in the document. So I'll have to scroll back up again. Apologize for that. So just keep your eyes closed for a second. I haven't figured out a better way to do it. So this is the reason why we engaged in these people processes, because this is the result from a Portland workshop where 46 of the challenges identified were related to people, 43% to process, and 11% to technology. So this was very good to hear, because processes feature so prominently, but also pointed out the need to look at the people side of things. This is the result of the survey that shows that there is strong interest in these topics. And this is how we're going to approach them. To answer Mike's question now, finally, that we're going to apply the same sort of methodology, which means first, document the current condition. So if it's workforce, we would identify a method to assess the state of our workforce. If it's organizational culture, there's a different methodology for assessing organizational culture. And then there are also documentation and rules and papers on change management. So our goals will be to identify the best methods and tools, and identify the goals and the characteristics of what kind of workforce do we want to have? What is our goal? What kind of organization do we want to have? How are we going to conduct change management? So, in the first phase, I identify recommended strategies and practices. So the reason why these things are bunched up in the in the first month is because we would expect and hope that they are going to inform these improvement initiatives so that we can provide something useful to these folks as they're planning to engage the workforce and implement the actual change. So I'll just stop and take a break now and ask for questions again.
Very impressive work, Cello.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So what I want to also show is that we have how this stuff is going to, how our work is going to be organized. So there's a folder called People Topics, and it includes 4 folders, one for planning and one for each of these items. So I will show what kind of materials are there now and how the organization of the materials will be informative to us to also know how the work will be conducted. So you will see that each one of these people topics has currently 3 main folders. One is references library, and I'll go and show what's going to, it will include resources and examples and materials and artifacts from other industries or our own industry, and 2 folders that have not been yet filled out, but in the future. This utility partner shared document, if I click on that, if you remember when we were talking about business processes, we created a folder for every agency where they were posting their strategic asset management plans, their risk strategies, and so forth. So we will also have a space where each agency, each utility can post their artifacts, their ideas, maybe their reports about these issues. In this case, it would be organizational culture. So that they can share with each other their current methodology, current reports, thoughts, and stuff like that. So obviously, since this comes from utility partners, I haven't filled that out. Workspace is also where we're going to keep all our work in progress, all the as we start getting into it. So since we haven't started work, it's empty. So I'll show you one example. Each of these 3 topics, I prepared a references library, which is just a beginning to provide at least the materials that I thought were relevant for each of the topics. And I'll show some of the examples on this topic of culture, which includes such things as, measure assessment methods for effectiveness, introductions to different frameworks. This is competing values framework that we were all familiar. These are different assessment methods and methodologies. And under background, I also included further literature, including articles from most of the time it'll be like Harvard Business Review or MIT Sloan School of Business, and also some methodologies, such, for example, the Globe. And if we go there, we'll say, okay, well, what does their questionnaire regarding organization culture look like? I will open this one just for the heck of it, which then includes not just the survey, but also the types of questions and how people will answer, and guidance on how to I opened the beta question, which is about society. Alpha is about the organization. So it's same in principle. It's just that the questions are different. So it's not about the society, it's about the company, and so forth. So, but you get the picture where you have, the surveys and then instructions on how to interpret the surveys and stuff like that. So I'm not necessarily advocating any of these things, but in the early days of research on these 3 topics, with the group who's interested in working on that, we're going to look at each topic, and to answer Mike's questions, the methodologies for assessment for example, for workforce are different than the ones for organizational culture, and they're all related. However, they're not all in the same bag. So if, for example, we go to workforce, we will find different types of reference materials, different types of methodologies, different types of reports, and stuff like that. So I'll stop again now and see if people have questions or comments. And Mike, you can tell me if this partially answers your question, at least.
I think we're getting there.
Okay.
This is a real good precursor or prerequisite, I think, to where we're headed. So I know you've been collecting this over a period of time, and it's quite a library that's forming up, and it compliments to that. So I'll leave it at that at this point.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I'm not answering the wrong question. So the one thing that you can see on the bottom is this purple thing. And that is what I called integrated change management. This is something that I've added after our first phone call when I realized that there was a need to add something like this. And that means that the work on these three topics would not stop on the workforce, organization, culture, and change management would not stop after WEFTEC, but it would continue with the goal to produce some sort of guidelines and documents that would help utilities deal with these issues. So the reason that I called it integrated change management is because it would be an attempt to take all the information that we've looked at as far as individual topics and put them in a practical document that could be shared with utilities and posted, that we select the things that best fit the characteristics of the water sector utility and include the best answers. So we will have a few months to debate that, select, and then really work on creating some guidelines that would be also scalable. So it would not just work for DC Water or San Francisco, but it will also work for a smaller utility that may have more limited resources and so forth. So the document, I call it integrated change management because the focus would be how do you actually get the work done? And it would then coalesce and include things that are related to organizational culture and workforce, and the methodology for the technical part of business process modeling would be referenced as well. So I'll stop again and see if there are any questions or concerns or anything that I can answer.
Thank you.
Cello, this is Tim Noyce from Toho Water Authority. So, I just want to make sure that I'm following you correctly. I initially thought that the workforce, the culture, and the change management were overlaid on the implementation of the four business processes that were carried forward in year one. But this appears that what we're actually looking at is these are all parallel paths, that you've got the improvement opportunities which would fall within one of those four different year one areas, but then you have parallel disciplines or focus areas of workforce, organizational culture, and group and change management. So these are all separate parallel paths. Is that correct?
In principle, yes. Yeah. In principle, they are parallel paths. So what I highlighted in red is if you look at the activities on improvement initiatives, the first part of these initiatives is really going to be a little bit more technical, doing the BPMN modeling, looking at as is, identifying the system, what kind of data you need, what kind of activities you have, who's involved, and all that. So if I can just ask somebody who's having a conversation, if they can just mute their line, that would be helpful.
Thank you.
So that the in these early stages, you know, more kind of business process analysis and modeling, they during that time, you see up to here is the people issues may not be, you know, on the front burner, but during that time, these three groups would try to prepare some guidance so that when this red is when the utility is doing improvement initiative, is starting to prepare an implementation plan. And at that point in time, it's in this activity here. At that point in time, the input would be really useful from the people that have really focused on these three topics. And this would coincide with the workshop. Now, theoretically, WEFTEC is going to happen at this time. These two red dots is that when we had a workshop at WEFTEC, that by that time, these three groups would have prepared some materials that would be useful. So the workshop would be a couple of days, and one of them would be to look at the improvement initiatives and get report on that. But the other one would be on what have we learned, what can we offer to these improvement initiatives in terms of guidance or help that is related to them to executing the improvement plan, which the people side, where the people side, you know, comes into play. So, and this is the execution. This is the long thing. And it may not be, I understand that not every initiative is going to fit exactly into this schedule. This is a template and a general approach how to coordinate a lot, you know, 20 utilities doing different things at roughly the same time. So it is not, you know, I'm not like the field marshal that can tell everybody, you know, how to march down. This is a template that, and then as a project team, we'll work with each of the utilities to kind of tailor, make and adjust this so that it makes sense for them and it makes sense overall. So after this initial period, when we looked at these three things separately, we're going to get together, and for the rest, this purple stuff on the bottom, this stuff right here, would then include people who have looked at all three initiatives and try to integrate it into documents so that we don't end up with things that don't connect to each other, and we have some sort of integrated documentation recommendation that combines all of these three things and make it as practical as possible. Does that answer your question, Tim?
It does, Chalo. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so let me just outline this stuff at the bottom of the schedule. And by the way, I'll show you where all this stuff is posted. At the bottom, there's a list of workshops, and the purple ones, the ones that we would conduct online, and we will still need to define exactly how we're going to do it. So the first one will be sometime in August. There's no way that we can do anything in July anyway. And the idea is that we will structure these online workshops, whether it's GoToMeeting or Zoom or Microsoft Teams, whatever it's going to be, in such a way that it has the least interference with people's day-to-day work. So maybe have half-day sessions and so forth. And the red ones are the potential workshops in case WEFTEC actually happens in person, and then utility management conference there on the right in February, where we would have workshops as well. And at the end, that black square is when our project this year two would end, and we would kind of complete the case studies to report on the improvement initiatives, prepare a report, and so forth. So is this helpful at all for people to kind of get a sense of what I'm trying to do?
Yeah,
And sorry, go ahead.
I just said yes, it's helpful.
Oh, thank you. So let me just show you where this stuff is. If anybody has trouble with accessing the files, let me know. But it's this L4M, which is Lift for Management UAIM folder that I sent to everybody. And it is under coordination, under planning, and you will see that this includes the recordings from the previous two sessions and the documents that I've shown and discussed today. So everything that we do is going to be posted to this to the OneDrive.
Jello,
Yes.
it's Mike. Yes, this is helpful. You asked that. What would really help me, and maybe some icing on the cake here, is if you can go back to the beginning of this call. You showed a process diagram, and you pointed at the training portion at the very beginning of that process. And I think you depicted it as an example of an opportunity to, I'll call it, drill in. And I thought where you're headed was, the workforce culture and change management, in that context as the opportunity. I'll stop there. Was that kind of part of why you brought that up?
Well, I think that partially yes, and I wanted to show on a real example because utilities, especially most of the folks that are engaged on this project seem to be the go-to people for a number of stuff in their utilities, and they're really swamped. And especially with this crisis, I had a sense that there may be there definitely is a lot more pressure and limitations and stuff like that. So I wanted to use this as an example to show that there is flexibility to keep the scope of work for each of the utilities more manageable and to allow us more spread. And the reason that I selected this, that I mentioned this specific box about training staff on the CIP development and update process is because it was during one of the calls as we were developing this model. This comes from one specific utility, and they said it made a big difference for us in the planning for the CIP once we really trained everybody on the process. So I thought, okay, this is something that includes, like you said, people, and includes organization and training and everything, that it's not a bad example to show. And also to, so that's the part, that's sort of why I mentioned that one, because it seemed like something that's contained.
Yeah, and it resonated with me. If I can keep going a little bit here.
Sure.
It may have been on a previous call or talking offline. I think it may be in the work plan itself. What we're looking at is that the expectation was maybe 20 different improvement initiatives could very well result here, and which is sounds a little ambitious, but it sounds great too. To get to 20. One thing you pointed out to me is that we could pick a process within one of the four tracks as you show on the screen there, or we can dive into our own utilities and pursue some aspect. I'll stop there. Is that correct?
That is completely correct. The reason that this results of the survey are what I wanted to accomplish. I didn't want everybody to work on the same exact thing. So since these 4 topics were developed collaboratively, and we already have a higher level structured,
Right.
that this would also allow for a collaboration, because if we have 5 different utilities working on the CIP delivery, I would want to create a team where they kind of work together and establish conference calls and connect the same thing for business case evaluation. Since they're all working on related things, it would make a lot more sense to have them connected. So that's why we wanted to know this. However, there are also at least 1 or 2 utilities who would like to look at processes that are outside of these 4 areas. That, maybe somebody wants to look at, business processes for responding to the kind of crisis that we have right now. But that, there was not enough time, frankly, to define something, but we can still do this in the next couple of 3 weeks. People can identify the things that are outside of here that are currently their higher priority, and what we can do then, publish what different people want to do and see if there is also an opportunity for collaboration on these others as well. Or people may, utilities may do them independently, like we did in phase 2, if you recall, when, Grand Rapids did the Cromer process, and Orange County did the pump stations and so forth.
Okay, that question, and that was helpful, sets up really my main question. So if you pick a process or an area of a process that you want to improve and elaborate on, the 3 aspects of people that you showed in the Gantt chart: workforce, culture, organizational change. I'm still having trouble, honestly, figuring that part out. So you have a team looking at a process they selected. There you go. Is that team also, as Tim mentioned, it's in parallel there? All 3 are to pursue those 3 aspects in that selected process, or one of
No.
the 3, or
Let me maybe this will help.
okay.
Let's say that you want to look at procurement. I don't know. So that means that you would select people who will look at how to improve procurement, which means that you will get people who know about the procurement, who are touched by procurement and stuff like that, and somebody who can also help them document and design. So that happens in these first few months. When it comes to prepare implementation plan and figure out how to do, because implementation plan may include something that has workforce, organizational culture impacts or changes to the organization, or need for collaboration. During that time when this person who is working on procurement does not have to engage in these 3 people topics yet. But the people who are engaged in these 3 topics would then try to prepare the materials, information, and research and recommendations, and would be meeting at WEFTEC with the people who have been defining what they need to do for their improvement initiatives, and have a conversation, an exchange of ideas, and some sort of recommendations on what kind of assessment methods to use, how to consider these 3 people issues, so they can then include them as they prepare the improvement plan, and also include these considerations in their execution of the improvement plan. So the idea is that we would not there are currently 70,000 books on innovation out there, and there are equally thousands of articles and books on everything from organizational culture, workforce. So our effort is going to have to be scaled down to pick the best and most reliable things that we can to provide assistance, and then it'll be the same, similar considerations, whether somebody's improving procurement or they including asset management plans, because it'll have to do with how you deal with people and organizations, and it'll how to get buy-in and stuff like that. So the idea is that these three topics for change management, culture, and workforce would provide recommendations that are generic, sort of to different types of improvements.
So, Cello, this is Scott, and maybe what I would say is completely redundant, but I'm stepping way back up and saying from a client or from a utility partner standpoint, what are they really looking at? One, and I'd say there are three aspects here. The first is that we've already done some work on 4 topic areas, but the focus hasn't been on applying that within your utility partner organizations so much. It was developing the 2B model, and that 2B model was pretty high level. So what Cello's suggesting is, if you wanted to take a whole topic area and go implement it or do your own tailored version, that's fine. But given the time and the constraints and all of that, most likely you would take a certain aspect. And he zoned in on certain boxes that could be, broken down further and all of that, and to take an area of one or more of those different topic areas and go develop a 2B process for that. So that's one kind of thing that you're choosing to do. There was a lot of interest in that, and following up and applying what's already been developed, and further refining it in the utility. The second thing is that there's these new topic areas, which are the people-oriented ones, the culture and the workforce. And there's going to be some work that you can sign up to participate in that is going to develop and put forth the research, and there'd be a consensus around the work groups there to further refine that and use business process modeling to help define that. And then and so you can choose to participate in that as well, or instead, or whatever you like. And then the third thing is the integration of those things, so that the first and the second thing kind of go in parallel. And then the idea is, as the people side, the organizational and culture and workforce aspects get further defined, the tools and practices get defined, and some processes, the utility partners would be in a position to apply those as appropriate in business processes that they're developing, which could be within the context of these 4 topic areas that we'd already started in year 1 and did a lot of great work, and now it's a matter of applying that and then integrate in the people, the culture, the organization, the workforce aspects of that into the work you're going and implementing. So to me, there's really one of the underlying objectives here is to put the utility partners in a position to choose what they want to work on, what they're going to go implement in their organization. And then Cello is also looking at, okay, across the full range of what everybody's going to do, let's get some consistency and let's target some different areas, hopefully, so that we're kind of filling in, the business process models that we have. And then Cello also said that, hey, if you don't like these 4, topic areas or pieces of them to explore, and you have something completely different in mind, then maybe there's even, some group think around some of those, but you'd be able to do that too. So there's obviously a big range of choice, and it's all going to be pulled together into the project and the research. But the idea is to give kind of maximum flexibility in terms of what each utility partner chooses to do.
So let me give you an example, Mike. For example, you mentioned this, trained staff on CIP development. We have on the workforce part, we have, Catherine Curtis on the phone now from San Francisco. And she has been up to her eyeballs in training and workforce issues for many years. So if training is part of the business process that you're trying to improve, it will just take us a little time, and we may have different people involved in these different types of improvements. There may be a different type of person developing a BPMN diagram from a person that says, well, this is, these are the strategies for training and providing artifacts and examples that are then useful. So we're trying to look at creating different views of improvement that come from different places, but they all are always focused on making tangible improvements for utility that can be measured in some way. I don't know if we lost Mike or if he's still there.
Thank you, Cello, for that great vote of support. This is Catherine. Currently, I'm knee-deep in a project to provide competency-based training to operations and maintenance staff, and we're conducting a pilot at our Oceanside plant, so I'd be happy to help with training.
Great, thank you. So Mike said that he has to go. I can see that he's still here, but he may be on a different line.
No, I'm here.
Did that answer your question at all, Mike?
Yeah, incrementally, and Catherine is a great example of a subject matter expert on steroids, particularly in this area, where I guess I just need understanding is that in this particular box of training, I'm still trying to figure out the people side of it, and I'm sorry for that. But what I'm hearing is in a viable scenario would be is that process, that box is selected and blown up in such a way that because it's such a critical part of project delivery and so forth, a team would blow it up into additional steps to improve it, let's say, so we're not biting off the whole elephant. Applying the people part of it still is elusive to me, and I'm sorry. But what I'm hearing,
okay.
What I'm hearing though is that there's this library and there's expertise within the team that we can draw upon, and there may be an aspect of one of those three that really resonates with this team, this team that has formed, and that could be the organizational development, the culture side of it, or whatever, or just the workforce. How many people does it involve? All in the context of training and such. But we may not be able to get to the other two, change management and the culture side of it. But we figure out a way to address it. But we may not, go as far as mapping or whatever. But we dove into the library in this scenario and recognize there's some key components that need to be brought out. And for time's sake, we don't maybe fully incorporate it, because workforce really resonated with us on this particular team. My question is that a accurate scenario that gets at a deliverable?
Yes. So the way, we're going to simplify it, is let's say you focused on this box in the upper left corner, you would make it into a collapse process, and you would have these types of diagrams beneath. These diagrams would tell you who is involved, who is in the swim lanes, who is doing what. But the research that Catherine would contribute would say, how do they get involved? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So because the diagram will just say, okay, this is a swim lane, and there's an activity that the person does, but how do they go about it? So it is just a different type of information about the same thing. And we're gonna, if we think about it, we're dealing with, complex issues, concepts, things that we're trying to have a holistic view And I think as we start working on this and defining, it will sort of incrementally become like a, very, very normal. And the same way when we started with business process modeling, you know what it was like in the beginning, that everybody was scratching their heads and, but now we have a number of people who are very proficient at it, who go in and do these analysis. I think we will just have to get through a similar kind of ramp up and hurdle on the people side as well. And I want to be sensitive to people's time. We're at 2 minutes before the top of the hour, and I'll ask just one more time if there are any other questions, and then I'll just profusely thank to everybody for joining the call. Are there any other questions?
I have a comment, Cello. This is Catherine. I'm also the chair of BayWork, in case anybody knows about BayWork. It's a collaborative group that works on workforce issues. And we've been diving into this digital theme. What are the worker skills needed for this new digital age? And what we found in our research is that the organizational culture has a direct connection to people's readiness for accepting change and trying new things. So I believe these three are very intricately connected to each other. So I just want to say that.
Yes, I would agree. I would agree. Thank you, Catherine.
Sure.
Any other questions? I'm going to stop the recording now,